Hi, we're back. So this is going to wrap up your learning either for today or maybe at some time in the future, since I'm not sure how much time you had dedicated today to learn about this third part of our district-wide day. And that's really looking at maximizing learning during that independent reading writing time of the workshop. So what I want to go over with you is just a couple of thoughts on, I'll go ahead and put in present mode so we can see. So I have a lot of resources in here, and I'm just going to walk you through a couple of them, and then the rest are there for you. But this is an example of that 90-minute, whether you're face-to-face or virtual, like how to really deep dive and plan out those minutes from the mini lesson then to the kind of release that we do into the independent reading where you're meeting with small groups and conferring. This is new for us this year, so I know this is something that you're really getting used to and you've been putting into effect. So this will maybe just only support you further. What's great about both of these is there's pieces inside them. We're going to focus on independent writing and independent reading, but there's pieces in each of these that actually give you more information. So I'm going to click on one just to show you what I mean. I just happened to click on the writing one. So you'll see that this is literally explicit with the I do part to the we do when you go ahead and you're seeing if your kids understand what you've been teaching them during the mini lesson. And we do have some pointers put in here about virtual just here and there, but there's some more later that I'm going to show you. But I did embed some links about, okay, so during independent practice, Penny Kittle is one of the best people I know that has some practical like record keeping and what to do during that time. So she has some good conferring ideas that are linked here. So feel free to dig in. And then here at the end for sharing, that's an important part of the workshop. How do you do that in this setting? So you can do that with a Flipgrid, Google Docs, as far as commenting even. I love the idea of a Google Slide partner share. So you have someone sharing slides that you link, kind of like I did for you during this presentation, and they actually write their thinking and they can kind of go back and forth and use different colors. The key there is making sure your partners are established and that you keep them 3 to 5 weeks and don't always change them. That way they kind of can get to know the person and then get to know their work and their reading and writing. So this is just kind of a breakdown of whether you're face-to-face or virtual. But back to some in our practicals right now and looking at, all right, so what do we do during that independent reading or independent writing time where we can kind of put some structures in place? Well, one of the things we can do as we're building our students to read for 30 minutes and to write for at least 20 to 25 minutes, while we're building that stamina and while we're learning to manage this setting is that we can employ stations. So in Literacy Essentials, as well as through our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the district, you have access to MemBean and IXL. So those could be your 2 of your rotations that you are using. So there can be an independent reading or writing, depending on what part of the workshop you're in, going on. And then they could have a 15-minute rotation as MemBean word practice or an IXL skill practice, and then another time with you. So it breaks up your minutes, but then you can be really strategic on what they're working on and then also how they're growing in their minutes of reading and how they're doing in their stamina for writing and producing coherent and legible writing. So let me give you a breakdown of what I mean. So this might be what it looks like. You can have either 2 groups, like a group A, group B, and just rotating them through. And you saw in my left-hand column here, I showed that they could do independent, MemBean, or IXL, and then meet with you. That might be a rotation. Or you can do independent reading and small group with teacher only. And that's really what we're working towards as we gradually release the idea of these programs being something they can do just as a transition between possibly homework since they're only 15 minutes maximum. But right now, you're most likely going to start here with 2 groups, or if you have bigger numbers, you could look at here. But for Literacy Essentials, we're probably going to hang over this idea. So I did this little graphic to show what it might look like at 2 weeks on a block schedule. And I have the groups on the side here, if you have face-to-face groups or virtual or co-seated group, how they might work. Now notice when I made this where my virtual co-seated kiddos are completely separate from interacting with my face-to-face. I've since learned that it is really great to actually group your kids where your face-to-face and virtual are mixing. So for instance, what I might do over here is I could have my independent reading group be a mix of those two kids, and then have another mix for Bean, and then a mix for small group. And then as they keep going through, then on the Zoom or the Google Meets or however I'm doing my small group or conference time, that group would be together and interacting. They'd all be doing their Bean at the same time, just some at home and some in my classroom, and they would all be reading, just some at home and some at their classroom. So that is another great way that you could do this. So on this scenario, I was getting them used to Bean initially, was the idea. And then I started bringing in IXL the next week. So this was as if I was rolling this out. It could be the other way around, or you could do them both. And then here's just some other resources for you. We need to consider looking at that live and then a blended and then a digital class that's synchronous or asynchronous. These are just pointers to consider about actually your direct teaching and the mini lesson piece, whether it's writing or reading. That the largest portion is this independent reading or writing time. We just talked about that. But then in conferring what the conferences might look like and how they might change. And so looking at asynchronous, then conferences would have to happen digitally, face-to-face meetings. That says face-to-fact. We need to correct that. Zoom, Google Meet, or through comments in Google Docs or a phone call. So you would have to actually schedule those in a synchronous way. And then you could also even use Padlet for some things like that. But I thought this was a good piece, and there's a great little article linked about writing workshop during the pandemic that has some super ideas, so I have that in there for you. Then the other piece about co-seeding tips that I just want to leave you with, again, more than you can do today. So kind of just, I'm going to let you dictate and explore what resonates with you the most on these. But the idea of the stations is something we do want you to pursue. But some things that I want you to consider, these were tips about co-seeding that came from two of our 7th grade teachers, that you really want to have to focus explicitly on building that community between both your face-to-face and your virtual kiddos. So that's what I was mentioning earlier. You can mix them for partners or small groups. You can mix them when sharing out. You can mix them, obviously in a back channel like a Padlet where they're interacting and responding. And then an idea that Melissa Flynn shared with us from North Junior High was that every Friday she dedicates a little chunk of time, I think it was like 10 minutes, where she literally does a big projector Zoom and puts her kids that are virtual on there. And she gives them 5 or 10 minutes, just talk and just share. And that way they're just connecting like they would be if they were in school together. So that's a great way to build that community in your class as well. If you would like to hear more about that, if you click on this link, it will take you to the recorded PLC Zoom we did. It was a 6th grade PLC Zoom, so feel free to fast forward until you hear the ideas are about co-seating, which are towards the last like 15 or 20, actually I would say the last 20 to 30 minutes of that Zoom. So that's another resource for you. And last piece to leave with you is really now I gave you that model of 90 minutes in reading and writing workshop. But then in co-seating, the I team made this great little chart about things to consider and think about. And then we took that and then adapted it to English language arts and reading, which would completely apply to literacy essentials. So what we did here is we wanted you to see, let me make it a little bigger once it loads. There we go. Oops. Make that where you can actually see what we're doing. Okay, so for instance, we always need to kind of greet and get our class started, just like you would stand out your door. So there's this setting the stage piece, which in the I-team piece was called a warm-up. So we wanted you to see what that would look like in workshop. It is a bit of a warm-up, but what we would do are ideas like flip gridding the share from the day before, where they watch it at the very beginning of class while kids are coming in. So again, this was where partnerships are super important, connecting those kids, because they would actually have the space that you created in your Google Classroom where they know to go to access those pieces. You could also do an open-ended question stem, a star-related stem. So we've linked some star stems here. I'm not going to click on them, but you'll see. And instead of multiple choice, you actually have them answer a question about what they were reading based on a star stem. A quick warm-up to get their brain thinking. And then we have several things. They can scan their reading, writing, looking for word study patterns that they've learned in MIMBing or vocab that they've been learning, and jot that in their readers or writers notebook. And then they can obviously celebrate something they're proud of as readers or writers, update their goals, say how they think they need to, where they need to improve. All those things are great. It's just a few minutes that you're taking at the beginning of class, maybe jotting down the favorite sentence that they've written when they go back and scan through their writing. And then you post that the next day as a warm up for people to comment on the sentences they like. So that's the idea. But let me jump ahead. It goes through each component of the workshop, but I want to jump to the independent time. Make sure it's on here. Yes, independent reading and writing. So this is where I just want you to see, you might be doing some of these things, but here are some ideas that we have learned. And as we keep hearing things, we kind of, keep updating, but this has been pretty consistent. But when they're reading and writing, and again, you could be doing those rotations, right? But we need to consider practically what that looks like with the multiple screens. Like you might need to project your Zoom, but then have another screen where your virtual kids are going to be meeting with your face-to-face in another, like a Google Meet for a conference. And then you can have your Zoom material still up on the projected screen where everybody can see it, including your virtual kids. So it's like thinking through those practicals and literally saying, okay, so face-to-face, this is what they might be doing. But in the Zoom, if they're working in their digital notebooks, they might be in the Zoom, you have to monitor. Hold on, let me move on up. We talked about the Padlet, and then you need to know when they're going to rejoin at a certain time. But the things in the green here is thinking about what are the collaborative tools that you're going to use for any interaction and for your small group, and consider multiple screens. And then if you go up here, there's also some more considerations. And this document is not friendly, it's not scrolling easily for me, during your mini lesson even to think through about like when you turn the screen on, off, camera on, off, the idea of taking a mentor text that you're using as your model and making a slide in 8.5 by 11 and just using it, capturing an image of it and putting it on there so it can be projected really in a big way for your kids. That's a great idea. And just looking through again, where's the space for annotation and visuals? Where's that going to be? So these are all resources to just continue to support you as you are teaching in this really interesting time of face-to-face, virtual, co-seat, and changing schedules. That was one of the benefits we heard about really thinking it through like this, is that even if some kids have to be quarantined, they were more prepared to move from face-to-face to home because they had been interacting with their virtual peers in a face-to-face connection. So they were already part of the class. So I want to end on that because you have had a lot of information today. So I'm going to head back to our presentation and wrap us up, because the last thing is any questions. And like I said earlier, you'll have your ticket out. Lindsay is obviously always a contact for you. And then we will continue working with Heather, who's been our kind of coach consultant, that we're going to like really work to support you in your desire to grow in those reading, writing conferences, and then the use of these programs and assessments to help drive that and help you monitor learning. So I'm super excited about our next steps. Thanks for your time.